In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
There are phenomena in the galaxy that defy explanation. Anomalies that make even the most learned tech priests question the Omnisia's design. Today's story is about one such impossibility. A creature of raw rage that appeared in the Octarius sector during the largest Tyranid invasion in recorded history. The Imperium called it many things: demon, Xenos aberration, weapon of the ruinous powers. But the creature had only one name for itself, roared across battlefields drenched in blood: Hulk. This is the account of what happens when unstoppable force meets insatiable hunger, when a being of pure rage faces the infinite swarm. And if you're brave enough to witness this tale of monsters battling monsters, subscribe to this channel. The Emperor protects those who seek knowledge, even when that knowledge brings only dread. Captain Erasmus Vale of the Cadian 843rd had seen horrors that would break lesser men. 17 years in the Imperial Guard had carved his face into a mask of scars and grim determination. He'd held the line against orc wogs, survived a demonic incursion on Bellis IV, and earned his captain's rank by walking through fields of his own dead soldiers without flinching. But nothing in his long service had prepared him for the object that screamed through Hive Fleet Behemoth's bioship swarm and struck the surface of Ultima Segmentum world designated Gravis Prime like the fist of an angry god. The impact crater was 300 meters wide. Vale approached it with his command squad, their lasguns raised, their hearts hammering against reinforced flak armor. Around them, the planetary defense had collapsed into desperate pockets of resistance. Tyranid organisms, termagants, hormagants, warriors, swarmed across the Hive city's ruins like a living carpet of chitin and claws. The air tasted of spores and decay. The Vox network screamed with dying prayers to the Emperor. But the crater was silent. Auspex reading, Kaler. Vale's command squad descended into the crater carefully, boots crunching on melted rockcrete and twisted metal. The heat from the impact still shimmered in the air. At the center of the devastation, partially buried in rubble, lay something that made Vale's breath catch. It was humanoid, roughly. 8 feet tall, its body corded with muscles that defied human anatomy. Its skin was green, not the pale, sickly green of Nurgle's corruption, but a deep, vibrant emerald that seemed to pulse with inner vitality. Tattered purple fabric clinged to its lower body. Its chest rose and fell with steady breaths. "Holy Throne," Keller whispered. "Sir, energy readings are. They're climbing. Whatever this thing is, it's waking up." Vale should have ordered an immediate withdrawal, should have called in an artillery strike, should have done anything except watch as those massive eyelids fluttered open to reveal eyes of burning white rage. The creature's gaze fixed on Vale's squad. It rose slowly, rubble cascading off its frame. When it spoke, the voice was a deep rumble that vibrated through Vale's bones. Where am I? Identify yourself in the name of the God Emperor, Vale commanded, lasgun aimed at the creature's center mass, knowing even as he spoke that his weapon would be useless. The green giant looked down at his hands, flexing fingers that could crush a man's skull like an egg. "Banner, Bruce Banner, but you won't like me when I'm..." The creature's eyes widened, nostrils flaring. It turned toward the crater's edge, toward the horizon where 1,000 Tyranid bioforms swarmed through the ruins. What are those things? Tyranids, Xenos organisms, the great devourer. They've come to consume this world, and you've landed in the middle of the largest invasion force humanity has ever... The creature, Banner it had called itself, took a step toward the crater's rim. Monsters, it growled, and Vale watched in fascination and horror as the muscles beneath that green skin seemed to swell, as rage kindled in those white eyes like promethium catching flame. A shriek split the air. 3 Tyranid warriors, each 10 feet of living weapon with blade limbs and barbed tails, appeared at the crater's edge. Their compound eyes assessed the new prey. Their venom cannons rose, targeting the green anomaly. Hulk's lips pulled back in a snarl. Hulk, smash! The transformation was instantaneous. The creature's body expanded, muscles bulging impossibly larger. It covered the distance to the Tyranid warriors in a single bound that shattered rockcrete beneath its feet. What happened next made Vale forget 15 years of guard training and simply stare. The Hulk seized the first warrior by its carapace and hurled it 300 meters through the air. It caught the second's blade arm mid-strike, twisted, and tore the limb from its body with a sprayle ichor. The third Tyranid warrior's venom blast struck the Hulk's chest dead center, and the creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it roared with such volume that Vale's helmet speakers crackled and drove both fists down onto the warrior's skull, pulping it into the ground. The Hulk stood amid the carnage, chest heaving, and turned its gaze toward the ruins where thousands more Tyranids swarmed. A smile, feral, terrible, hungry for violence, split its face. More, it growled. Then it leapt toward the swarm, each bound covering impossible distances, and Vale realized he was witnessing something that would change the war entirely. The Tyranid Hive Mind had evolved to counter every weapon in the Imperium's arsenal, but it had never encountered anything like this. The Hulk crashed into the Tyranid swarm like a meteor of pure violence. Vale watched through his magnoculars as the green giant seized a Hormigaunt, a creature designed by billions of years of predatory evolution, and used it as a club to batter aside a dozen more. Chitin cracked, ichor sprayed in arterial arcs across rubble. The Hulk moved with a terrible efficiency, each blow fueled by rage that seemed to grow with every wound the Xenos inflicted. Vox, Vale snapped to his communications officer. Get me Lord General Kration, Priority Alpha. Tell him we have a new variable on the battlefield. While his operator worked to cut through the screaming chaos of guard frequencies, Vale studied the impossible combatant. The Tyranids were adapting already. He could see it in how the termagants shifted their firing patterns, how warriors coordinated their strikes to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. The Hive Mind was learning. It always learned. But so, apparently, was the Hulk. A gargoyle, winged bioforms that typically harass enemies from above, dove toward the green giant's head, talons extended. Without looking up, the Hulk caught it mid-flight and spiked it into the ground hard enough to create a crater. 3 more gargoyles adjusted their approach. The Hulk waited until they committed, then leaped straight up with such force that the pavement beneath him shattered. He caught all 3 in midair, crushed them together, and hurled the broken mass into a cluster of warriors below. "By the throne," Sergeant Vraston breathed. "It fights like a space marine, but it's stronger, much stronger." "No," Vale corrected, his tactical mind cataloging every movement. Space Marines fight with discipline and doctrine. This thing fights like a natural disaster given purpose. The Vox crackled. Captain Vale, this is Lord General Creation. Explain your priority transmission. We're losing the Eastern Hive districts and I don't have time for... My lord, we have a massive humanoid Xenos organism engaging Tyranid forces at grid reference Epsilon 7. It's winning. Silence on the Vox. Then, say again, Captain, winning? Vale watched the Hulk tear through a wave of termagants, each strike killing multiple organisms. He appeared immune to bioacid, toxins, and conventional bioweapon strikes. What chapter? Which Space Marines deployed without... It's not a Startase, sir. It's something else, something I've never seen in all my years of service. Another pause. Vale could imagine Creation in his command bunker, surrounded by tactical displays showing the inevitable collapse of their defense lines. The Lord General was a pragmatist. He'd made his career on Armageddon by knowing when to spend lives and when to preserve them. Can we control it? Creation asked, finally. Vale watched the Hulk grab a Tyranid warrior by its tail, swing it in a complete circle, and release it to demolish a partially standing hab block. The structure collapsed on a cluster of lesser bioforms, crushing them under tons of rockcrete. No, my lord, I don't believe we can. Then we use it anyway. Mark its position. Vector all remaining forces to establish a perimeter. Let the Xenos kill each other. We'll clean up whatever survives. The Vox clicked off. Vale lowered his magnoculars and made the call. Within minutes, what remained of the Cadian 843rd was repositioning, along with elements of the Krieg Death Corps and a battered squadron of Lehman Russ battle tanks. They formed a loose cordon around the combat zone, waiting to see which monster would prove stronger. The Hulk, for his part, seemed to grow more powerful with each passing moment. A Tyranid warrior's bone sword managed to slice across his back, a wound that would have bisected a human, and the Hulk simply roared louder, grabbed the warrior by its head, and squeezed until the carapace imploded. Another slash across his arm, another roar, another kill. Specialist Keller studied her auspex with growing alarm. Captain, his bio readings are increasing. Heart rate, body temperature, muscle density, everything's climbing. It's like he's feeding off the damage. Or the anger, Vale murmured. He'd seen berserkers before, warriors who found strength in rage, but this was beyond anything in human psychology. This was rage incarnate, rage given form and purpose. The swarm began to adapt its tactics. Warriors pulled back, directing lesser organisms forward in coordinated waves. They were testing, probing, forcing the Hulk to expend energy on chaff while they analyzed his patterns. Vale had seen the Hive Mind employ this strategy against armored columns, wear down the big threats with expendable troops, then strike with precision bioforms when the enemy weakened. But the Hulk didn't weaken. He waded through hormagaunts like they were children's toys, each punch creating shockwaves that shattered exoskeletons. He grabbed termagants by the handful and threw them into larger organisms. When a Tyranid warrior tried to impale him with both blade arms, the Hulk caught the limbs, roared directly into the creature's face, and ripped it in half down the middle. The ground trembled, not from the Hulk's impacts, but from something else, something massive approaching from the ruins of the Eastern Hive districts. Vale raised his magnoculars and felt his blood turn to ice. A Carnifex, a living battering ram, 12 feet of armored fury designed to break fortress walls and crush main battle tanks. Its 4 arms ended in scything talons and crushing claws. Thugometer barbs lined its spine. Its carapace was thick enough to shrug off laser cannon fire.
Vale had seen one of these monstrosities take a direct hit from a basilisk artillery shell and keep charging. The Hive Mind had deployed its heavy armor. The lesser organisms pulled back, creating a clearing between the two titans. The Carnifex lowered its massive head, fixing the Hulk with compound eyes that held no intelligence, no personality, only the infinite hunger of the swarm. It bellowed, a sound like tearing metal and dying worlds. The Hulk cracked his knuckles, smiled that terrible smile. "Finally," he growled, "something my size." Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul.
The Carnifex charged with the inevitability of a collapsing hive spire. Each footfall cracked the pavement, its multi-ton bulk accelerating to speeds that defied its massive frame. The Hulk didn't dodge, didn't attempt to evade. He simply lowered his shoulder and met the charge head-on. The impact echoed across the ruined cityscape like thunder. The shockwave shattered windows in buildings 100 meters away. Vale's entire squad staggered from the pressure wave. When the dust cleared, both titans remained standing, locked in a contest of pure strength. The Carnifex's crushing claws wrapped around the Hulk's torso, the Hulk's hands gripping the creature's armored head. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Muscle strained against chitin. Biological engineering refined across galaxies met a gamma radiation accident that broke every law of physics. The ground beneath them cracked, spiderwebbing outward from the pressure. Then the Hulk roared and began to push back. Vale had served alongside Adeptus Astartes. He'd watched Space Marines in Terminator armor wrestle with Orc war bosses. He'd witnessed feats of transhuman strength that elevated the Emperor's finest above mortal men. But this was something else entirely. The Hulk's muscles swelled impossibly larger, his skin darkening to a deeper emerald as rage compounded upon rage. Veins like cables stood out across his neck and arms. The Carnifex's head began to tilt backward. "Impossible," Keller whispered, her augmetic eye whirring as it tried to process the bio readings. "Sir, the energy output from that green organism, it's exceeding Astartes' combat parameters by a factor of 12, and climbing." The Carnifex responded with the Hive Mind's cold intelligence. Its upper arms released their grip, and blade appendages snapped forward, stabbing into the Hulk's sides. Bioacid dripped from serrated edges, a toxin designed to liquefy armor and flesh alike. The blade sank deep, punching through muscle and tissue. The Hulk's response was to laugh, a sound more terrifying than any Xenos shriek, and wrenched the Carnifex's head sideways with such force that vertebrae cracked audibly even at Vale's distance. The bioform stumbled, its coordination disrupted. The Hulk didn't give it time to recover. He released the creature's head, drove both fists into its thorax, and lifted. "Holy Emperor," rest and breathed. The Hulk raised the entire Carnifex over his head, 12 tons of living weapon held aloft by a creature that shouldn't exist. For a moment, the tableau held, green giant and armored monster silhouetted against Gravis Prime's smoke-choked sky. Then the Hulk brought the Carnifex across his knee like a man breaking firewood. The crack of shattering exoskeleton echoed across the battlefield. Ichor sprayed in a fountain. The Carnifex's spine severed, its rear leg spasming uselessly. But the Hive Mind didn't design its warrior organisms with concepts like mercy or surrender. The Carnifex's upper body twisted, claws still grasping, mandibles still seeking flesh. The Hulk grabbed those grasping claws and pulled. chitin shrieked as he tore the limbs from their sockets one by one, discarding them like broken toys. The Carnifex thrashed, its alien biology struggling to pump ichor through catastrophically damaged circulatory systems. The Hulk placed one massive foot on its torso, seized its head with both hands and twisted. The head came free with a wet, tearing sound. The Carnifex's body twitched once, twice, then went still. The Hulk held the severed head high, roaring his victory to the burning sky. Around the perimeter, Imperial guardsmen stood in stunned silence. Even the veteran Krieg troopers, men bred to see death as currency and sacrifice as duty, stared at the green titan with something approaching awe. Vale's vox crackled. "Captain, this is Lord General Krashen. Confirmed visual on enemy Carnifex-class organism. Confirmed, my lord. The creature is terminated. Casualties to termination force." Vale looked at the Hulk, who had dropped the Carnifex head and was now scanning the ruins for more enemies. "Zero casualties, sir. The green organism killed it single-handedly." Another pause. Vale could hear shouting in the background of Krashen's command bunker. Could imagine tactical officers scrambling to revise their defense plans around this impossible variable. "Captain Vale, I'm issuing new orders. That creature is now Priority Asset Alpha. Vector its movement toward the primary swarm concentration at the Planetary Governor's Palace. If it wants to kill Tyranids, we'll give it a target-rich environment. Sir, we have no means of controlling or directing. Then make it want to go there, Captain. Use your imagination. Crashing out." The Vox clicked off, leaving Vale with an impossible order and a creature that had just dismantled a Carnifex the way a child tears apart an insect. He watched the Hulk pick up a fallen Tyranid warrior's blade arm and study it with something approaching curiosity before crushing it in his fist. "Ideas?" Vale asked his command squad. "Could lure it with enemy concentration. Those organisms want to kill him. Maybe if we draw them toward the palace, he'll follow." "Or," Keller said slowly, her augmetic eye fixed on the Hulk, "we could try talking to it. The creature spoke before, called itself Banner. Maybe there's still intelligence under all that rage." Vale considered. Every instinct screamed that approaching the Green Titan was suicide, but he'd survived 17 years in the Guard by knowing when to take calculated risks. And right now, humanity needed every advantage it could get. He handed his lasgun to Vrastin. "If this goes wrong, don't waste ammunition. Just pull back and vox the Lord General." "Sir, you can't." "That's an order, Sergeant." Vale walked toward the Hulk with his hands raised, moving slowly, carefully. The creature noticed him immediately, those white eyes fixing on the approaching human with an intensity that made Vale's skin crawl. Up close, the Hulk was easily 9 feet tall now, perhaps more. His body was covered in wounds that were already visibly healing, flesh knitting together at an impossible rate. "Banner," Vale called, keeping his voice steady. The Hulk's eyes narrowed. "Banner is weak. Hulk is strong. You're fighting the Tyranids, the monsters. They're everywhere on this world, consuming everything. Millions of them." A low growl rumbled from his chest. "Millions. Billions, actually. And their main force is concentrated 5 kilometers east at the palace." Vale pointed toward the horizon where the largest hive structures still stood. "That's where the real fight is, where the strongest monsters are." The Hulk followed his gesture, nostrils flaring as if he could smell the swarm from here. Perhaps he could. "Stronger than that?" He gestured at the Carnifex corpse. "Much stronger. Hive Tyrants, Trigons, warriors by the thousand. But maybe," Vale let doubt color his voice, playing to the creature's pride, "maybe they're too strong even for you." The Hulk snapped toward him, eyes blazing. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he took a step closer. Vale forced himself not to retreat, not to show fear, even as every survival instinct screamed at him to run. Nothing is too strong for Hulk. Then the creature turned toward the east and began to run. Each stride covered 10 meters. Within seconds, he was bounding across the ruins, leaping over collapsed buildings, moving toward the palace with single-minded determination. Vale exhaled slowly, realized he'd been holding his breath. His hands were shaking. "By the throne," Keller said over the Vox. It actually worked. "Get me the Lord General. Tell him his asset is inbound to the palace, and Emperor help whatever in his way." In the distance, the Hulk's roar echoed across the city, a sound of pure, endless rage racing toward an enemy that had never encountered anything it could eventually devour. The Hive Mind was about to learn a harsh lesson. Some prey fights back.
The Hulk's approach toward the palace didn't go unnoticed. The Hive Mind, that vast distributed intelligence spanning light years, felt the disruption in its carefully orchestrated consumption of Gravis Prime. A singular anomaly, a node of violence that refused to be categorized, refused to be understood through the genetic memory of 1,000 devoured worlds. So it adapted, because that's what the Tyranids did. Always. Vale's command squad followed at a distance in a Chimera transport, its engine straining to keep pace with the bounding green Titan. Through his magnoculars, Vale watched the swarm's response with growing dread. Tyranid organisms weren't simply attacking anymore. They were coordinating with a precision that suggested the Hive Mind had devoted significant processing power to this single threat. Hormagaunts emerged from ruins in packs of 20, attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. The Hulk swat them aside, but for every one he killed, 2 more darted in to slash at his legs, his back, any exposed flesh. Individually, the wounds were nothing. Collectively, they were beginning to slow him down. "They're learning his patterns," Keller observed, her augmetic eye tracking the swarm's movements. "Watch, they feint from the front, draw his attention, then strike from behind. Classic pack hunter tactics." Tyranids don't just hunt, they optimize. A Tyranid warrior emerged from a collapsed administratum building, its venom cannon already charged. It didn't fire at the Hulk directly. Instead, it targeted the ground beneath his feet. The bioacid ate through already weakened rockcrete, creating a pit. The Hulk crashed through, falling into what had once been an underground transit tunnel. 3 more warriors were waiting below. The tunnel collapsed in a shower of debris and a war of pure rage. When the dust cleared, the Hulk emerged carrying a warrior's corpse in each hand, using them as shields against incoming fire. He hurled one body into a cluster of termagants, then the other into a gargoyle swarm that was attempting a diving attack. Both improvised projectiles struck with lethal force. But the Hive Mind kept adjusting, kept learning. Vale's Vox crackled with Lord General Krashen's voice. "Captain, our set is taking longer than projected. What's the situation?" "The swarm's adapting, my lord. They're using coordinated strikes, environmental traps. The creature is still advancing, but the Hive Mind is throwing everything at him." "Then we help him get there. I'm authorizing artillery support. Designate targets." Vale felt a grim satisfaction. Finally, something he understood. Combined arms warfare. "Keller, paint targets for the basilisks. Concentrate fire on large concentrations ahead of the asset's path. Clear him a corridor." Within minutes, artillery shells began screaming overhead. Earthshaker cannons spoke with the voice of the Emperor's wrath, each shell obliterating dozens of lesser organisms. The Hulk seemed to understand the support. He accelerated toward the cleared zones, using the bombardment to funnel the swarm into more manageable choke points. But the palace was still 2 kilometers away, and the Hive Mind was marshalling its forces. A tremor shook the ground, not from artillery, not from the Hulk's impacts. This was something else, something massive moving beneath the surface. "Underground contact," Keller shouted. "Throne, it's huge, Trigon class, maybe larger." The pavement 50 meters ahead of the Hulk erupted. A Trigon Prime burst from below, its serpentine body easily 40 feet long, its bioelectric weapons crackling with lethal energy. These creatures tunneled through solid rock, emerged beneath enemy formations, and devastated entire platoons before they could respond. The Hulk had nowhere to dodge. The Trigon's timing was perfect. The bio-lightning hit the Hulk square in the chest, enough electrical discharge to fry a Lehman Russ's systems. The green giant staggered, muscles spasming, steam rising from his skin. The Trigon struck like a serpent, its massive mandibles closing around the Hulk's torso, chitinous teeth designed to crack open tank armor, biting deep. Vale gripped his magnoculars tighter. This was it. Even the impossible creature had limits, and a Trigon Prime was death incarnate. The Hulk's eyes, which had dimmed from the electrical attack, blazed bright again. Not white now, they were glowing green, the same color as his skin, but lit from within with radioactive fury. He grabbed the Trigon's mandibles, one in each hand, and began to pull them apart. The Trigon thrashed, trying to shake him loose, trying to inject paralytic toxins into his bloodstream. The Hulk's response was to brace his feet against the creature's thorax and pull harder. Chitin cracked, flesh tore. The Trigon's bioelectric weapons fired wildly, scorching the surrounding area with uncontrolled discharges. With a sound like a hab block collapsing, the Hulk tore the Trigon's head in half. The creature's body convulsed, its tunnel-bore scything talons carving furrows in the pavement. The Hulk didn't wait for it to die. He grabbed the still-twitching body and hurled it into the palace gates a kilometer away. The impact demolished a section of wall and crushed countless organisms that had been gathering for a defensive stand. The Hulk beat his chest and roared. The sound carried across the entire battlefield, a challenge to everything that heard it. And the Hive Mind answered. From every direction, organisms converged. Warriors, hormagaunts, termagants, gargoyles, thousands of them, a living tsunami of chitin and hunger. The Hive Mind had made its calculation. This anomaly was too dangerous to study, too destructive to ignore. It needed to be eliminated through overwhelming force. "Emperor's mercy," Vraston whispered. "They're committing everything." Vale watched the swarm close in from all sides, watched the Hulk spin in place like a cornered predator. For the first time since this impossible battle began, he saw something in the green giant's posture that might have been concern. "Artillery!" Vale barked into the vox. "Danger close! Fire everything!" "Captain, at that range we'll hit the asset!" "Do it now!" The world became thunder and fire. Basilisks, manticores, even the precious remaining ammunition from the Deathstrike missile silos, everything the Imperium had left rained down on the palace approach. Tyranid organisms vaporized by the hundreds. The ground became a cratered hellscape of molten rockcrete and shredded biomass. Through it all, the Hulk kept moving. Shells exploded around him, on him, and he simply powered through the bombardment as if it were rainfall. He grabbed organisms mid-charge and used them as stepping stones, leaping from corpse to corpse through the artillery storm. His skin was scorched, his body covered in wounds that healed almost as fast as they appeared. He was magnificent, terrible, unstoppable. The palace gates loomed ahead, and beyond them he could see what had summoned such desperate defense. A Hive Tyrant, the Hive Mind's command organism, stood atop the governor's throne room. 12 feet of lethal intelligence, covered in armor plating, wielding both psychic powers and physical weapons. Around it, an honor guard of 20 warriors stood ready. The Hulk crashed through the gates like they were paper, his eyes locked on the Hive Tyrant, the Tyrant's compound eyes fixed on him in return, and for a moment 2 alien intelligences assessed each other. Then both charged, and the palace shook with their collision. "All units," Krashen's voice came over the vox, tight with tension. "Hold the perimeter. Whatever happens in there, we do not interfere. Let the monsters kill each other." Vale lowered his magnoculars. He'd been a soldier long enough to know when to follow orders and when to witness history. Today, he was watching something that would be told in guard barracks for generations, if anyone survived to tell it.
The throne room had once been a monument to imperial grandeur, vaulted ceilings adorned with aquilas, marble floors polished to mirror shine, stained glass depicting the emperor's glory. Now it was a charnel house. Tyranid organisms had converted the space into a digestion chamber, walls coated with resin, organic growths pulsing with the hive mind's distributed consciousness. The air was thick with spores and the sweet rot smell of biomass conversion. The Hive Tyrant stood at the chamber's center, a living embodiment of the swarm's terrible purpose. Its bone sword oracled with psychic energy, its lash whip coiled and uncoiled with serpentine grace. Behind its armored skull, synaptic nodes pulsed, coordinating the thousands of organisms still swarming outside. This was no mere killing machine. This was the Hive Mind's avatar. Billions of years of evolution compressed into a single apex predator. The Hulk hit it like a meteor. The impact drove both titans through 3 support pillars and into what had once been the governor's receiving hall. Marble shattered. Resin coating exploded into dust. The Hulk drove punch after punch into the tyrant's carapace, each blow creating fracture lines in armor that could shrug off plasma fire. The tyrant responded with its bone sword, the psychic blade cutting deep into the Hulk's shoulder, down to bone. The Hulk's answer was to grab the sword mid-strike and snap it in half. The tyrant's alien mind processed this impossibility. Prey didn't break bone swords, didn't shrug off psychic trauma, and adjusted. Its lash whip coiled around the Hulk's neck, barbed hooks designed to drain neural energy sinking into green flesh. At the same time, it drove its remaining sword arm into the Hulk's chest, directly over his heart. For 3 seconds, they remained locked together. The tyrant's psychic assault hammered against the Hulk's consciousness, trying to overwhelm, to dominate, to reduce him to a paralyzed shell. The hooks drained energy with desperate efficiency. The blade twisted, seeking vital organs. The Hulk's eyes blazed brighter. His muscles swelled larger. The roar that erupted from his throat wasn't pain. It was pure, distilled fury given voice. He grabbed the lash whip with both hands and pulled, dragging the Hive Tyrant toward him despite its struggling mass. Then he headbutted it with such force that the tyrant's cranial armor cracked. Outside, Vale watched through shattered palace windows as the battle raged. His tactical display showed something that made his blood run cold. The other Tyranid organisms had stopped their assault. Every Hormogulant, every warrior, every lesser bioform had frozen in place, their attention focused on the throne room. "They're all watching," Keller breathed. "The entire swarm, the hive mind is observing." "It's learning," Vale realized. "Every move that creature makes, every adaptation, the hive mind is recording. Even if the tyrant dies, they'll know how to counter him next time." Inside the throne room, the Hulk had torn free from the lash whip, leaving chunks of his own flesh still attached to the barbs. The wounds closed within seconds. He caught the tyrant's descending blade arm, twisted it behind the creature's back, and drove his other fist repeatedly into its thorax. Chiton crumbled. Ichor sprayed. The tyrant shrieked, not in pain, for it knew no such thing, but in pure data transmission, uploading combat metrics to the greater swarm consciousness. The Hulk grabbed the tyrant by its skull and back carapace, lifted it overhead, and brought it down across his knee. The crack echoed across the entire palace complex. The tyrant's spine shattered, its lower body going limp. But even crippled, it fought. Its upper arm seized the Hulk's head, mandibles snapping toward his face, venom sacs pulsing to deliver killing toxins. The Hulk bit down on the tyrant's primary feeding tube and ripped it out with his teeth. Ichor flooded his mouth. He spat it aside and began systematically tearing the tyrant apart, not in rage now, but with something approaching method. Limbs separated from sockets, armor plates torn free, organs crushed beneath massive hands. The Hive Mind's avatar reduced to component biomass. When it was done, the Hulk stood in a pool of ichor, breathing heavily, his body covered in wounds that were already healing. He looked down at the tyrant's destroyed form, then up at the organic growths covering the walls. His eyes narrowed with predatory intelligence. "Still hungry?" he growled at the palace itself, at the Hive Mind watching through 1,000 compound eyes. Then he began to tear the palace apart. His fists demolished support structures. He ripped bioconduits from walls, destroying synaptic connections. Every organic growth, every piece of Tyranid infrastructure, he systematically destroyed it all. The palace groaned, structural integrity failing. The Hulk didn't stop. He seemed to understand instinctively that this wasn't just a building, it was part of the swarm itself, and he was going to kill every piece he could reach. Outside, the frozen organism suddenly spasmed. The Hive Mind's control faltered, its attention divided between maintaining the swarm and processing the catastrophic damage to its command structure. Warriors stumbled, or Mogulants attacked each other in confusion. The perfect coordination that made Tyranids so lethal collapsed into chaos. "All units," Lord General Krashen's voice boomed across every Vox frequency. "They're disrupted! Attack! Attack now! For the Emperor!" What remained of Gravis Prime's defenders surged forward. Laser guns flashed in the smoke. Plasma weapons fired until their coils melted. Battle tanks rolled through rubble, their cannons speaking destruction. The Krieg Death Corks fixed bayonets and charged into the confused swarm with the silent devotion of men who had never expected to survive anyway. The Hulk emerged from the collapsing palace, its Baroque spires crumbling behind him. He was covered head to foot in ichor, wounds, and dust, but he was alive. More than alive, he seemed to have grown larger, his body adapting to the endless combat, his rage sustaining him beyond all mortal limits. He looked at the chaotic battlefield, at the Imperial forces cutting through the disrupted swarm, at the thousands of Tyranids still present despite their losses, and he smiled that terrible smile. Hulk's strongest one there is. Then he leaped back into the swarm.
For the next 6 hours, the battle raged. The Hulk was everywhere, crushing warriors, demolishing gargoyles, tearing through Hermagants like a farmer harvesting wheat. The Imperial forces followed in his wake, reclaiming ground meter by bloody meter. The Hive Mind kept adapting, kept learning, but it couldn't adapt fast enough. The Green Titan was chaos incarnate, unpredictable, impossible to counter because he followed no tactical doctrine, obeyed no strategic logic. He was simply rage and strength given terrible form. As Gravis Prime's sun finally broke through the smoke clouds, Captain Erasmus Vale stood atop the palace ruins and surveyed a battlefield of corpses. Tyranid biomass covered square kilometers, already beginning to dissolve into nutrient soup. Imperial casualties were horrific, 3/4 of the defending force dead or wounded, but they had held. Against a full Tyranid invasion, they had held. And in the center of the carnage, the Hulk sat among the dead, his breathing finally slowing. As Vale watched, the green giant's body began to shrink, muscles deflating, size decreasing. Within minutes, he was merely 8 feet tall instead of 10, then 7, then 6. The transformation reversed itself, and where the Hulk had been, a human man now sat, bruised, bloody, wearing only tattered purple pants. Bruce Banner raised his head, looked at his hands with something like despair, and whispered words too quiet for Vale to hear. Vale approached carefully, his lasgun lowered. "Dr. Banner?" The man looked up with haunted eyes. "How many did I kill?" "Thousands, tens of thousands. You saved this world." Banner's laugh was bitter. "I didn't save anyone. The Hulk doesn't save. He just destroys everything in his path until nothing's left." He stood on shaking legs, surveying the carnage. "Those things, the Tyranids, they'll be back, won't they? They'll adapt, learn how to fight him. They always do." "Maybe," Vale admitted. "But today, they learned that some prey fights back, and that's a lesson worth teaching." Banner looked at him for a long moment, then up at the stars becoming visible in the clearing sky. "I need to leave, before he comes back, before the Hulk decides your people are enemies too." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere far from people. Somewhere I can't hurt anyone else." Banner turned away, started walking toward the ruins. "Tell your general. Tell him I'm sorry for all of it." Vale watched him go, this broken man who housed the most powerful weapon he'd ever witnessed. Part of him wanted to stop Banner, to secure him as an asset for the Imperium. But a larger part, the part that had survived 17 years by trusting his instincts, knew that some weapons couldn't be controlled, shouldn't be controlled. He raised his hand in salute to Banner's retreating form, a gesture of respect from one soldier to another. In the aftermath, Lord General Krashen would report the victory through official channels, omitting the impossible warrior who had turned the tide. The administratum would classify the incident, bury it under layers of bureaucratic red tape and classified seals. The few who knew the truth would be sworn to secrecy on pain of death. But in the barracks and foxholes of 100 Imperial worlds, the story spread anyway. Guardsmen whispered it over recaf and low sticks, the tale of the Green Titan who fought a Carnifex with his bare hands, who tore apart a Hive Tyrant like it was made of parchment, who turned the tide of an unwinnable battle through sheer unstoppable rage. Some call it propaganda. Others dismissed it as battlefield mythology, the kind of story desperate soldiers told themselves to find hope in the darkness. But Captain Erasmus Vale knew better. He'd seen it with his own eyes. In a galaxy of endless war, where 10,000 humans died every second and 1,000,000 worlds burned in the Emperor's name, he had witnessed something unique. A force of nature that answered the universe's cruelty with matching violence. The Tyranids would return, of that there was no doubt. The Hive fleets were infinite, patient, inexorable. They would adapt to the Hulk's tactics, evolve new bioforms to counter his strength, and return to finish what they started on Gravis Prime.
But somewhere in the darkness between stars, a broken man carried an unbreakable monster inside him. And if the swarm returned, if the galaxy's endless appetite for destruction demanded another sacrifice, the Hulk would be waiting. Because rage never truly dies, it only sleeps, gathering strength for the next inevitable fight. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And sometimes, just sometimes, the monsters we fear learn to fear something worse. The Emperor protects, but on that day, it was rage, pure, primal, unstoppable rage that stood between humanity and the void's hunger.